this is Anita from 5 Minutes with Art. Today we're going to talk a little bit about one of my favorite artists. And if you've been listening to this podcast, you'll know who my favorite artist is. Yes, it is Vincent van Gogh. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what was the reason for Van Gogh's sadness. Van Gogh is truly an interesting character. You know, he had mental illness, loneliness, depression, and sadness. His last words were, "The sadness would last forever." So he was known to have these bouts of depression and anxiety, and he had spent time in a mental hospital. Van Gogh had shot himself. His brother Theo came rushing from Paris down to his bedside. He did not die immediately. And Vincent van Gogh passed away. His last words to his brother Theo were, "The sadness will last forever." In a letter to the sister Elizabeth, this is what Theo said. He did not wish to stay alive, and his mind was so calm, because he had always fought for his convictions that he had measured against the best and noblest of his predecessors. His love for his father, for the gospel, for the poor and the unhappy, for the great men of literature and painting, is enough proof of that. In the last letter which he wrote me, and which dates from some 4 days before his death, it says, "I tried to do as well as certain painters whom I've greatly loved and admired." People should realize that he was a great artist, something which often coincides with being a great human being. In the course of time, this will surely be acknowledged, and many will regret his early death. He himself wanted to die. When I sat at his bedside and said that we would try to get him better, and that I hoped that he would then be spared this kind of despair, he said, "The sadness will last forever." I understood what he wanted to say with those words. I really love that letter from his brother Theo wrote to the sister Elizabeth, because there's really a lot of things in there where he talks about how Vincent van Gogh one day would be remembered for the great artist he is. And today, if you look at the great artists that ever lived, if you look at the top three, Vincent van Gogh's name is always up there as one of the top three. We know that he had these frequent bouts of depression. We know that he had anxiety. We also know that he had a very hard time within the community, especially after he tried to cut off his ear. You know, people that were going against him, they were doing a petition to try to get him, out of the community. He wasn't liked. He wasn't very well liked. He, was really basically a very sad, lonely person who was probably this sort of eccentric artist that people during the time didn't quite understand. Vincent van Gogh, he said that he himself talked about how lonely he was. And in a letter to his brother Theo on the 24th of September in 1888, he wrote, "I believe that eventually I'll stop feeling lonely in the house, and that on days of bad winter weather, for example, in the long evenings, I'll find an occupation that will absorb me completely. A weaver, a basket maker, often spends entire seasons alone or almost alone with his work as his only pastime. But what makes those people stay where they are is precisely the feeling of the house, the reassuring familiar look of things. Of course, I'd like company, but if I don't have it, I won't be unhappy on that account. And then, above all, the time will come when I'll have someone. I'll have little doubt about that." So we know that he was really very, very lonely, and he felt this great bit of sadness. He also knew that he had mental illness. He knew that he, was quite not mentally quite there, that he had these, suffering from the mental illness. So he knew and he understood that. And he saw that as being something that was basically stopping him from doing maybe all the things he wanted to do. If you'd like to be able to learn more about this, we've written a blog on this, which is entitled, "What was the reason for Van Gogh's sadness?" And in that blog, I have several great quotes that he's quoted, that he's written, that explain it more. Just at the end of this, I'd like to say that there have been people who have supposed and have said, we don't know this for sure, but it maybe would have been some of the chemicals or other things used in the oil paints that sort of causes depression, as mental illness and other things. We don't know that for sure, but that could have been a very real possibility that he could have had some kind of toxicity or some type of, chemical exposure, because, during the time, oil paints weren't as they are today, where, a lot of those chemicals and other things have been taken out of them. This is Anita from 5 Minutes with Art. Thank you so much for listening. We really do appreciate you, our listeners. We appreciate you joining with us as we learn about art each week. We'd like to thank our team that puts this together, specifically Rico, for help making this possible. And we'd just like to thank you for joining with us.